Hi, Ben here and welcome back to another Work in Progress Wednesday. So the last couple of days I've been making some blades for James Mersall, who's the Windsor Workshop on Instagram, and he's a chair maker but he also develops his own range of tools. So James makes Travishers, he's also got some amazing scrapers that he's just developed, but this is one of his this is made from Delrin, so this is one of his new sort of black Delrin bodies. And I use that to just check that the blades are the perfect shape and the perfect curve. So I'll just drop that into the body. These are some blades that I've made and they're heat treated, and I just check that they go in there and they've got that same beautiful curve. Now obviously when they come out of heat treat, they're still all dark and they haven't got their final edge on there. So we're going to take them to the first bit of kit that I moved, which is the buffer. So the buffer's at this end now, which is kind of good, out of the way. And I use one of these little Scotch-Brite deburring wheels, and that will just polish off that scale. So you'll probably see that I'm wearing my overalls. We're introducing the overalls. So these are my orange overalls that I wear. Well, they were orange when I first had them, but they keep me from getting all covered in all this horrible gunk when you're making blades and stuff. So this is a 3-phase buffer. You've got to be a bit careful, but it has got an emergency stop down there, which is really handy. So I'm going to carefully clean that up. So it still sparks a little bit because you're just taking that scale off. We polish up that inside face and we'll take off that dark scale off the back edge of the blade as well. So that does a really good job of just taking off that heat treat scale. Now the actual cutting edge that's here is still dull because that's only had the primary grind just before heat treat. So we're going to take that to the grinder and I'll show you how we put that final edge on there. So the grinder that I'm using to put the final edge on those Travisher blades is that KMG TX grinder that I showed you last week. Now somebody had a great idea because I mentioned that this is a bit too high when it's in its horizontal position, and they come up with a really simple idea. It's almost so simple I didn't think of it. A little step, so I've got a bit of old pallet that seems to be perfect, so I don't need to adjust the bench now. All I do is just pull this out and it's going to be the perfect working height for putting those final grinds on the Travisher blades. So I'm using this contact wheel and it's going to allow me to polish that back edge of the blade. This is a 220 Cubitron ceramic belt, which works really nicely, and obviously with being variable speed it means I can slow it down so it's not going to scorch the steel. I'm going to put on a glove as well. It's funny when you're knife making you play around with loads of different gloves, but these seem really good. They're nice and insulated so you don't get burned with the sparks. Inevitably you always end up catching a knuckle on the grinder so the gloves wear out, so put a bit of protective tape on there. And I'm going to use this contact wheel to polish that back edge of the blade. Just like so. And what you can see, because we curve them, you end up with this slight hollow grind on the back side, which is actually an advantage. It means that it's going to be easier for people to sharpen in the long term. So that's cleaned up that edge. We want that nice shiny edge, otherwise if you leave any sort of marks or divots in there you won't get it sharp. So now I'm going to use the curve of the wheel to actually get that final grind on that inside bevel. So this is where that curved wheel really is an advantage. Just check that I've got it at the right angle, so I can see that I'm only taking it off the back of the bevel there. So change my angle slightly. And I'm looking and I'm making sure that I get rid of all those deep scratches from the pre-grind, and I'm looking for a burr to appear on that reverse side of the cutting edge. I've got rid of all those marks now, but I want to make sure I've got a burr the whole way along, and I can see there's a bit there but not all the way along. So back onto the grinder, and I can see a burr now all the way along. I don't know whether you can catch it in the camera, but you can see that burr. That's what we're looking for. So I'll just gently hit that reverse side again just to take off that excessive burr. And we can kill the grinder. Now what we're going to do is we're going to just buff that edge, remove that burr, and it'll be absolutely razor sharp. So we've come back to the buffer. Now the great thing about these buffers is they have these ends which we call a pigtail, and you'll sort of see why in a minute. That's got the Scotch-Brite wheel on there at the moment, but you just spin it the wrong way, and you can see it's got this coarse tapered thread, hence a pig's tail, which means that I can change the wheels out really quite quickly. So that was the Scotch-Brite. Now I'm putting on a felt wheel, and I'm just putting that on, tightening it up. So this is going to be used as the means to actually buff out the burr on those. So we'll turn it back on again, and I use a little bit of polishing compound on that wheel. Being very careful to work below the centre line, and I'm just going to polish the reverse first. Like so. And then I'm going to do that bevel. Now go nice and gentle, because we're not trying to round over the edge, but we're just polishing that bevel itself. And I'll normally flip it, do a couple of passes, one on either side. Just like so. Now you'll notice that I wasn't wearing any gloves. Definitely don't want to wear any gloves when you're using a buffer. If they catch, then it's going to do a lot of damage to you. So I've got a slightly weepy thumb. I caught it on a 60 grit belt yesterday, so I've got a little bit of masking tape to protect it, but don't wear any gloves. And then what I'm going to do now is just with a cloth, just take off that slurry, making sure that it doesn't cut through the cloth and into my fingers. And then we can see that nice polished edge that it puts on there. And I want to make sure that it's got no burr on there. So I can run my thumb off the cutting edge and just feel if it bites. Oh yeah, it's got a nice bit of zing. And what we do on the Travisher blades as well is we take these sharp corners off. You don't need the corners, and they can sometimes leave like a little tram line on the bit of wood that you're using it for. So yeah, we take those corners off, but the rest of it is all lovely and razor sharp. So that's really nice and sharp now. So what we'll do is we'll put a protective coating on it, and then we can send them off to James. So we've got all the blades sharpened now. So I've come through to where I've got my little setup for this protective wax that we put on the blades. Because I don't fit the blades to the bodies here at the workshop, we send them off to James. We need to put this protective wax coating on the blades for in transit. So you heat it up, it melts, and then you can dip the blades in there. Obviously it's very runny at that stage. And then I put that onto some aluminium just to let the wax cool. It doesn't take very long for the wax itself to cool. This is one that I dipped probably about a minute ago. And you can see that it puts this nice protective coating on there, obviously protects the edge. But when you actually peel this off, it just peels off nice and easily, but it does leave a thin protective coating of oil on the blade. So obviously these are made out of carbon tool steel, so if they're getting sort of shipped around the country, around the world, it will leave that lovely thin coating of oil on there that will prevent any corrosion really. So a lot of you might be thinking, well, what the heck's a Travisher blade? I've never really heard of what a Travisher is. A Travisher is basically a curved spoke shave, for want of a better word. So I've fitted one of those freshly sharpened blades into this dowel ring body that James has made, and they've got these real nifty little Allen key tensioners in there, so you can just drop the blade in and you can tighten that up really sort of quite precise. That allows you to get a very precision sort of set blade, so you can get just the perfect amount of shavings to come off. And then it's traditionally used for cleaning up the inside of a curved adzed chair seat, a Windsor chair, but you don't have to be making chairs to use one of these tools. I use it a lot for cleaning up rough sawn timber, so this is a piece of rough sawn cherry, and you can use it across the grain, and what it does is it cleans up those sort of rough saw marks, and I like it because it puts this lovely sort of tool textured surface to timber, so it almost looks like you've spent ages going over it with a gouge, leaving this lovely clean sort of chiseled look. And it's such a joy to use, and you get these lovely shavings coming off. So this is a nice sharp blade. It's nice to test them to make sure that you've got that edge just perfectly sharp, ready for James to fit to those Travisher bodies and send them all over the world to various chair makers and green woodworkers. So that's what we've been working on this Wednesday. Hope you enjoy seeing what we're doing in the workshop, and remember to subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you next week.